They laid me off 1 year before my pension was supposed to vest. Just 1 year. I remember sitting there, listening to the CFO, Scott Miller, tell me it was just business, with that practiced, empty smile. I nodded, shook his hand, and walked out. I kept my face utterly neutral. But inside, a quiet storm was brewing, because what Scott and his private equity bosses at Granite Peak Capital Partners had forgotten, or simply chosen to ignore, was that the machine generating 40% of their annual revenue ran on my patent. And production, I decided, was about to stop. Instantly. You see, I'm Mark, 54 years old, and for over 2 decades, I was a senior mechanical engineer at Caldwell Manufacturing. We built industrial packaging equipment, the kind of heavy machinery that fills, seals, and labels products for brands everyone knows. If it came in a bottle or a box in the Southeast, there was a good chance our equipment touched it. I started there at 32. Caldwell was different from the fly-by-night firms I'd worked at before. Family-owned, good benefits, a pension plan that actually mattered. The kind of place where you could build a life, not just collect a paycheck. The Caldwell family had owned it since 1962. Arthur founded it, his son David expanded it, and David's daughter, Eleanor, was running things when I joined in 2002. They understood that keeping skilled workers around was essential. And I did build something there. Not just a career, but an actual machine. Back in 2009, the company was struggling. The recession hit manufacturing hard, and our old sealing systems couldn't compete. Clients needed faster output without sacrificing quality, and our existing designs just couldn't deliver. I remember Eleanor Caldwell in a meeting that February, her face etched with worry. Orders were down significantly, major clients were leaving. If we didn't differentiate, Caldwell might not last. That night, I went home and started sketching. Not for work, not officially. I just couldn't stop thinking about it. Everyone was trying to make mechanisms faster, but faster meant more heat, more wear, more problems. It was the wrong direction. For the next 18 months, I lived in my garage workshop. Nights, weekends, even vacation days I never took. My wife, Sarah, probably thought I was losing my mind, spending $23,000 of our own money on prototypes. But I knew I had something. I designed a rotary sealing mechanism that was 40% faster than anything on the market, maintaining critical precision. The innovation was a variable pressure chem system that adapted in real time to container material and thickness. It wasn't faster, it was smarter. Glass, plastic, aluminum, it didn't matter. The system calibrated on the fly. This is the important part, I developed all of this on my own time, with my own money, using my own equipment. My employment contract had a standard intellectual property clause covering work done on company time or with company resources. I was obsessively careful. Every component was purchased with personal funds. Every hour of development was outside of work. I kept receipts, time logs, dated photographs. I even had my neighbor witness and sign documents to verify my timeline. Paranoid? Absolutely. But I'd seen what happened to engineers who invented on company time. The company owned everything. The inventor got a plaque. I wanted something different. When I brought the concept to Caldwell's leadership in late 2009, they were interested but skeptical. The company was bleeding money, they couldn't invest in unproven tech. So, I made them a deal. I'd license the patent exclusively to Caldwell for manufacturing and sales, and in return, I'd receive a 3% royalty on every unit sold. I retained full ownership of the patent. The agreement was clear, reviewed by lawyers, and signed by both sides. Patent number 8,234,567 was registered in my name. The Caldwell RS-400 rotary sealing system launched in 2011. It saved the company. Within 3 years, it was our flagship product, generating roughly 40% of total company revenue. My royalty checks weren't yacht money, but they paid off our house and built a comfortable cushion. Sarah stopped thinking I was crazy and started thinking I was clever. I was promoted, given my own development team, and consulted on every major product decision. Eleanor Caldwell always introduced me as the guy who saved Caldwell. For 15 years, that's who I was. The company treated me well, and I treated them well back. Then, the Caldwell family sold the company. Eleanor was approaching 70, her kids weren't interested in manufacturing, and private equity came calling. Some firm out of Dallas with a name that sounded like a random word generator had churned it out, Granite Peak Capital Partners. I knew what private equity meant: buy, squeeze, flip. Employees who built the value get discarded. But I thought I was safe. I was essential. I held the patent. My agreement was ironclad. Turns out I was half right. New leadership arrived quickly. A CEO, Robert Kingsley, who'd never worked in manufacturing but had an MBA from some impressive university and a reputation for aggressive cost-cutting. And his CFO, Scott Miller, mid-40s, former consultant, looked at spreadsheets like a surgeon assessing what to cut. Every conversation with Scott felt like an efficiency audit. He'd ask about headcount while you were explaining technical processes. The first 6 months under Granite Peak were unsettling but manageable. Layoffs started in support departments. Carol from accounting, who'd been there almost as long as me, was let go. Chris, my engineer on the team, looked sick every time a new name was announced. The consultants kept circling engineering, but we were too valuable to cut. The RS-400 was the cash cow. You don't fire the people who understand the cash cow. I kept my head down, hoped the storm would pass, and collected my royalty checks. Then came the pension review. Granite Peak's financial team found Caldwell's legacy pension plan was significantly underfunded. Their solution: offer early retirement to anyone within 18 months of vesting, or transition to a 401k. I was 21 years in, vesting was at 22 years. Just 12 months away from locking in roughly $4,200 a month for life, plus health subsidies. Total lifetime value, around $1.2 million. 12 months short, and I'd get nothing. The meeting with Scott Miller was on a Tuesday afternoon in March. His office used to be the old conference room, now with frosted glass and art that cost more than most of our assembly line workers made in a month. He didn't stand, didn't shake my hand. "Mark, thanks for coming in," he said, gesturing to a chair. I declined his offer of coffee, sat, and waited. Silence makes people uncomfortable. Uncomfortable people talk more than they should. Scott shuffled his papers. "We're restructuring the engineering division. Your position is being eliminated effective 30 days from now." I didn't react. Just processed. Years of engineering taught me that the first response is rarely the best. Collect data first. He took my silence as an invitation to continue. "You'll receive a severance package equal to 6 months' salary, plus accrued PTO. Your health insurance will continue through COBRA. It's competitive given market conditions." I still said nothing. He shifted in his expensive chair. "Look, Mark, I understand you're close to pension vesting. Unfortunately, the restructuring timeline doesn't accommodate individual circumstances. It's just business. Don't take it personally. Just business. Don't take it personally." The words echoed. The exact opposite of what they claimed. I nodded slowly. "Just business," I repeated, letting a slow smile spread across my face. He looked relieved. "We appreciate everything you've contributed. Caldwell wouldn't be where it is today without your innovations." "You mean the RS-400? I asked. "Among other things, yes. That product line has been tremendously valuable." His tone was smooth, practiced. I stood up. He extended his hand, a gesture meant to signal amicable professionalism. I took his hand, shook it firmly. "Okay," I said. No argument, no threats, no outburst. Just acceptance. Scott looked genuinely surprised. His rehearsed expression slipped. I expected more pushback. Some of the other senior staff have been quite emotional. I kept smiling. Would pushback change anything? No. Unfortunately, the decision is final. Then I'll save my energy. Thanks for the conversation, Scott. I walked out, not hurrying, not hesitating. I collected my personal items, my colleagues watching with that awkward relief that it wasn't them. Chris stopped by my desk, pale. Mark, I just heard. This is insane. You built this place. I shrugged. Apparently, that doesn't matter anymore. What are you going to do? Go home. Figure things out. Don't worry about me, Chris. You've got your own situation to manage. He nodded, still looking sick. Good kid. He'd probably be next. I handed my badge to security, walked to my car, and sat there for 3 minutes, collecting my thoughts. Then I drove home. Sarah was in the kitchen. She saw my face before I spoke. They did it, she said, not a question. Yep. 30 days. Just business. Don't take it personally. She didn't say anything. Just came over and hugged me. We stood for a minute. Then she stepped back, that look on her face she gets when she's 3 moves ahead. What's the plan? I smiled, the same smile I'd given Scott Miller. I'm going to make a phone call. Brenda Harrison had been my intellectual property attorney since I filed the original patent in 2009. She was semi-retired now, only took cases that truly interested her. Mine always had. Something about an engineer who actually planned ahead. Brenda, it's Mark. They just laid me off. I heard her chair creak. When? Today. Effective in 30 days. 1 year before my pension vests. A long pause. I could almost hear her mind working. Brenda was methodical, thorough. Kevin, she said, her voice careful, have you reviewed your licensing agreement recently? Not in a few years. Why? Because there's a termination clause. Section 12, paragraph 3. If either party materially breaches the spirit of the business relationship, the other party may terminate the licensing agreement with 30 days written notice. I remembered it. We'd included it as protection against Caldwell selling to someone who might exploit the technology. But I'd always assumed it was theoretical. Brenda continued, a reasonable argument could be made that terminating your employment specifically to avoid pension obligations, while continuing to profit from your intellectual property, constitutes a material breach. That's bad faith. Would that hold up in court? Maybe, maybe not. Courts don't like subjective standards. But here's what definitely would: the licensing agreement requires continued royalty payments. If they've stopped making them or tried to invalidate your ownership, that's an unambiguous breach. When was your last payment? December. Q1 isn't due until the end of April. Check your employment termination paperwork, she said. See if there's any language about the licensing agreement. I pulled out the thick folder of legalese Scott had given me. Page 6, buried in the miscellaneous provisions. Employee acknowledges that all intellectual property developed during employment or related to company operations belongs to Caldwell Manufacturing LLC and agrees to assign any outstanding claims to such property as a condition of receiving severance benefits. They were trying to take my patent quietly. Hidden in termination paperwork, like a clause nobody would read. Asterisk sign here for severance. Oh, and by the way, everything you invented is now ours, asterisk Brenda, I said, I think we have a problem. She almost laughed. No, Mark. They have a problem. They just don't know it yet. The next 2 weeks moved fast. Brenda assembled her legal team. I gathered every document related to the patent development, receipts, bank statements, time logs, dated photographs, witness statements from my neighbor. The original 2002 employment contract, which predated my patent work and contained no claims to independently developed IP. The paper trail was bulletproof. My paranoia from 15 years ago was about to pay off. Brenda drafted a 16-page cease and desist letter. I read through it with her on a video call. This paragraph establishes your undisputed ownership, she explained. This section details the licensing agreement. This addresses the attempted fraudulent assignment in the severance documents. And this final section is the kill shot. The kill shot? She read it aloud. Therefore, pursuant to Section 12, Paragraph 3 of the licensing agreement, Mark Patterson hereby terminates said agreement effective immediately due to Caldwell Manufacturing's material breach through attempted fraudulent acquisition of patent rights. Any continued manufacture, sale, or distribution of equipment incorporating U.S. Patent 8,234,567 shall constitute willful patent infringement subject to enhanced statutory damages of up to $150,000 per unit. How many RS 400 units did they make last year? I asked. About 800. So if they make even one more unit after receiving this letter, they're potentially liable for $150,000 in damages. If they keep producing, they'll bankrupt themselves within a year. Brenda smiled. Exactly. We sent the cease and desist certified mail to Caldwell's headquarters, with copies to Robert Kingsley, Scott Miller, the legal department, the board, and Granite Peak Capital Partners in Dallas. Then we waited. The first response came 18 hours later, an email from Caldwell's general counsel, formal, requesting documentation. Standard opening move. Brenda sent everything, 200 pages of receipts, photographs, contracts, witness statements. Let them see how solid our position was. The second response came 2 days later. My phone rang, unknown number, Dallas area code. Mr. Patterson, this is legal counsel for Granite Peak Capital Partners. We need to schedule an immediate meeting. I directed them to Brenda. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went fishing. Took my boat out on the lake, sat there with a line in the water, thinking about nothing. My phone stayed in the car. The fish weren't biting. Didn't matter. Monday morning, the video call. 6 people on their side, 2 Granite Peak lawyers, Caldwell's general counsel. Looking nervous, Robert Kingsley annoyed, Scott Miller looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, and a patent litigation specialist from a big firm in New York, at least $400 an hour. On our side, just Brenda and me. Her from her home office, me from my kitchen table. Robert Kingsley spoke first. Mark, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We have no intention of claiming your patent. That clause in the severance documents was standard boilerplate language. It shouldn't have been included in your specific situation. I didn't respond. Brenda had coached me to stay silent. The more they talked, the more they revealed. Scott jumped in. We're prepared to remove that language from your severance agreement and honor the original terms. The licensing agreement can continue. There's no need for legal action here. Brenda leaned into her camera. Let me make sure I understand. You're acknowledging that Caldwell Manufacturing has no claim to U.S. Patent 8,234,567, that my client retains full ownership, and that the licensing agreement remains the governing document for any use of that technology. Yes, Robert said quickly. Absolutely. This was all a misunderstanding. Good. Then you'll have no objection to signing an amended agreement that explicitly confirms those terms in writing. The lawyers exchanged glances. The patent specialist unmuted himself, his face carefully neutral. What specific amendments are you proposing? Brenda shared her screen. A 23-page document appeared. She'd spent the entire weekend preparing it. First, explicit confirmation that Mark Patterson is the sole owner. Second, a revised royalty structure reflecting the current market value. The original 3% was negotiated when the RS 400 was unproven. 15 years of market dominance justifies renegotiation. Third, audit rights allowing my client to verify accurate reporting of units sold. Fourth, a personal guarantee from Granite Peak Capital Partners that royalty obligations will be honored regardless of any future sale, restructuring, or bankruptcy of Caldwell Manufacturing. The silence stretched. I watched Scott Miller's face go through 3 shades of red. Those terms are significantly different, one of the Granite Peak lawyers said carefully. The original agreement was negotiated when my client was a valued employee with job security and pension benefits, Brenda replied, her voice calm, almost pleasant. Circumstances have changed. My client's leverage has changed accordingly. Scott Miller finally exploded. This is extortion. You're holding our production line hostage. No, Brenda said, her tone unwavering. This is intellectual property negotiation. My client owns technology that generates 40% of your portfolio company's revenue. You tried to take that technology through a fraudulent assignment clause. You terminated my client specifically to avoid pension obligations. If you'd like to discuss extortion, we can add those facts to the public record when we file our patent infringement lawsuit. The patent specialist leaned forward. Let's be careful about characterizations here. Mr. Miller's comments were expressing frustration, not making legal accusations. My client doesn't care about characterizations, Brenda said. My client cares about fair compensation. The terms I've outlined are reasonable. The alternative is litigation that will cost you significantly more in legal fees, damages, and lost production time than any royalty increase we're proposing. Robert Kingsley held up his hand. Let's take a break. We need to discuss this internally. The call ended. Brenda turned to me. They'll counter, but they're scared. That litigation specialist charges at least $400 an hour. They wouldn't have brought him in unless they knew they were exposed. What happens now? Now we wait. And while we wait, they have a decision to make. Keep producing RS 400 units and risk $150,000 per unit in damages, or stop production and start losing money every day. They can't fulfill orders. You think they'll stop? Brenda smiled. I think they'll stop within 48 hours. She was right. The counter came 2 days later. They confirmed my patent ownership, offered a modest increase from 3% to 4% royalty, but rejected audit rights and the personal guarantee. Brenda rejected their counter. We demanded audit rights, back payment of the Q1 royalty they'd been planning to withhold, and a 7% rate going forward. They came back agreeing to limited audits, but not the guarantee or 7%. We demanded full audit rights and a personal guarantee covering 5 years. We'd accept 5%. This went on for 3 weeks. Calls, emails, revised documents. During that time, something interesting happened. Caldwell's production lines went quiet. Not officially. Publicly, they announced scheduled maintenance on the RS 400 equipment, routine upgrades. But I knew the truth. Brenda had sent a follow-up letter after our first cease and desist, notifying them that any units produced after the termination date would constitute willful infringement. Every unit was a potential lawsuit. So they stopped building them. I heard about it from Chris, my former colleague. He called me on his personal phone after hours. Mark, the floor is dead. Nothing moving. Management says it's maintenance, but nobody believes that. The RS 400 line has been dark for 2 weeks. Any word on why? He paused. There's a rumor going around. Something about your patent. About you not actually signing it over. I didn't confirm or deny. Just told Chris to keep his head down. 3 weeks of zero production on their flagship product. Customer orders piling up. Competitors circling. I heard through industry contacts that major accounts were already talking to other vendors. The phone calls from Granite Peak to Robert Kingsley were reportedly getting more frequent, more urgent, angrier. They'd bought Caldwell expecting reliable cash flow from the RS 400. Instead, their investment was deteriorating daily. The final agreement came together on a Thursday afternoon. Brenda called me with the details. Her voice was satisfied. They capitulated, she said. Full ownership confirmation. Royalty rate increased from 3% to 7% retroactive to the acquisition date. Quarterly audit rights with independent verification. Personal guarantee from Granite Peak covering all obligations for the next 7 years. And one more thing, she added. What? Full pension vesting. They're going to reinstate your employment for the remaining 12 months, then allow you to retire with complete benefits as originally structured. You'll be on paid administrative leave during that period. No actual work required. I sat down hard on my couch. They gave me everything. They didn't have a choice, Mark. 3 weeks of shutdown cost them more than your pension is worth. Customer relationships were deteriorating. Their projected revenue for the quarter was shot. Granite Peak's investment thesis for Caldwell Manufacturing depended on the RS 400 revenue stream. Without your patent, that investment is worthless. They ran the numbers. Paying you was cheaper than fighting you. So, they paid. The reinstatement paperwork arrived the following week. A formal letter from Robert Kingsley acknowledging my termination had been processed in error due to miscommunication. It was nonsense, of course. Everyone knew what had happened. But it gave them cover. Let them have their face-saving language. I had what I wanted. I signed the amended licensing agreement. Brenda filed the necessary documents. Everything buttoned up. Caldwell's production line started running again within 48 hours. I heard they brought in weekend shifts to catch up. Some delayed orders were filled at cost just to keep customers from leaving. Over the next year, I collected my salary without working, watching from a distance as Granite Peak struggled with the consequences of their greed. The RS 400 delays had damaged customer relationships. 2 of Caldwell's senior engineers quit after seeing how they'd treated me. They reached out privately, asked for references. I gave them good ones. The company's reputation in the industry had taken a hit. Word gets around. The story of the engineer who owned his own patent and shut down production became a legend in manufacturing circles. Granite Peak didn't like that story being told. My royalty checks arrived quarterly. 7% instead of 3%. More than double what I'd been making. The audit reports showed accurate unit counts for the first time in years. Turns out they'd been underreporting sales by about 15% for years. That discrepancy alone added nearly $80,000 in back payments. On the anniversary of my original termination date, I officially retired. Full pension, full benefits. A small ceremony in the Caldwell conference room. Robert Kingsley shook my hand and thanked me for my contributions with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I shook back, smiled the same smile I'd given Scott Miller a year earlier. Just business, I said. Don't take it personally. He didn't laugh. Sarah was waiting in the parking lot. We drove to our favorite restaurant, ordered the most expensive thing on the menu, because we could. She raised her glass. To patience, she said. To paranoia, I replied. Same thing sometimes. She laughed. 22 years of watching you organize receipts finally paid off. It really did. 6 months after my retirement, Granite Peak sold Caldwell Manufacturing to a larger industrial conglomerate. The sale price was reportedly 20% lower than their original projections, thanks to customer attrition and competitive pressure during that shutdown period. My licensing agreement transferred to the new owners automatically. The personal guarantee from Granite Peak remained in effect. The royalty checks kept coming like clockwork. Brenda called me a few weeks after the sale closed. Just had an interesting conversation with the new ownership's legal team. They wanted to understand the licensing terms before finalizing the acquisition. What did you tell them? The truth. That you own a patent generating 40% of their newly acquired revenue stream. That the licensing agreement is ironclad. That any attempt to modify terms without your consent would result in immediate termination and production shutdown. How did they take it? Better than Granite Peak did. The new general counsel actually complimented the contract structure. Said it was some of the cleanest IP licensing he'd ever seen. Asked if you'd be interested in consulting on future development. I laughed. Consulting? Apparently your reputation precedes you. The engineer who outmaneuvered a private equity firm. They think you might have useful perspective. Funny how that works. Last month, I got an official letter from Caldwell's new engineering director. They were developing an upgraded version of the RS400 and wanted to know if I'd be interested in consulting. Market rates, plus a bonus for any patentable improvements. I wrote back with one condition: any new patents developed during the engagement would remain my property, licensed to Caldwell under terms I'd negotiate separately. They agreed immediately. My first consulting session was 2 weeks ago. They flew me out, put me up in a nice hotel. The new engineering team, a great guy named Ethan leading it, had hit a wall with a thermal management system. The same problem I'd solved 15 years ago with a different approach. Took me about 4 hours to sketch out a solution. They looked at me like I'd performed a magic trick. Ethan pulled me aside afterwards. Said he'd heard stories about Granite Peak, asked if the rumors were true. I told him the rumors were probably conservative. He just laughed. Said it was nice to finally meet the guy who taught private equity a lesson about reading contracts. My next session is next month. They're already talking about a retainer. So, here's the final scorecard. My pension, $1.2 million in lifetime benefits, fully vested, checks arrive on the 1st of every month. Royalty rate increased from 3% to 7%, an extra $180,000 per year. Back payments from audit discrepancies, $80,000. Legal fees, $45,000, worth every single penny. Consulting income, $4,800 for that first session alone, with more coming. Total cost to Granite Peak for trying to steal my patent? 3 weeks of production shutdown. Customer attrition that dropped their sale price by 20%. Legal fees north of $100,000. And Scott Miller's career. He was let go 4 months after the Caldwell sale. The official reason was restructuring. The real reason was that Caldwell became a case study in what not to do. Last I heard, he was working at a smaller firm in Nashville, a significant step down. Someone who knew him said he'd become very careful about reviewing termination documents. Robert Kingsley landed at another private equity portfolio company, failing upward, as some do. Chris, my former colleague, got promoted to lead the engineering team after 2 of the senior guys quit. He called me last week to thank me for the reference. Said the new ownership was actually listening to the engineers for once. My wife and I booked a trip to Spain for next spring. Madrid, Barcelona, Seville. First real vacation in 15 years. We're using the back payment money. Seemed fitting. My workshop in the garage is still running. Got a new project going that has nothing to do with sealing mechanisms. Just something interesting. No corporate entanglements. Just me and the problem. They said it was just business. Turns out, I'm pretty good at business. What's the most valuable lesson you've ever learned the hard way?